Well, hi and welcome to Practice Makes Parent, where we understand it's not about perfection, but about transformation. I'm Dr. Danny Huerta.
And I'm Rebecca St. James. Today we are talking about how we can guide our kids through media and entertainment consumption.
Oh,
And
fun.
wow, is this an important one? Yeah, fun. it's just a big one and really challenging, I think, to navigate, and something that our parents weren't navigating to this level. And it feels like new territory, I think, for a lot of us as parents. And we just need to talk about it. And Danny, I have kind of a somewhat funny, somewhat embarrassing, somewhat confessional story that
Wow, it's a
happened with
lot
my
combined.
kids just recently. So it involved really my two oldest girls, and they were asking about this toy phone, and it's not a legit phone, of course. They're 10 and 6. We're not gonna hand them a phone at this point. But so it has no internet, no, cell service or anything like that, but it has some little games on it and it can take pictures and things like that. And they were so obsessed, Danny. It was like, we really want this toy phone and we really want to save up and use our money for this toy phone. And it was just hopping on it for week after week after week. And I think the idea of it I didn't like, because it's just like, oh, they want to have this screen. They're idealizing this idea of a screen and, kind of trying to play into this screen time idea. And it just frustrated
Mm.
me. So I was kind of fighting it, fighting it. Well, finally, they kind of wore me down in a way. And I was like, you know what? I just want them to get this fun, and just like every other toy, they can have it for a couple of weeks and they'll realize that they had the dopamine hit of how fun this toy is. And then they'll be over it and go back to kind of normal life. And sure enough, that's in essence what happened.
Mm.
But it was this moment of just going, oh my goodness, the obsession of screens is
Yes.
just so rampant in our culture, and it's so idealized by our kids. And I tell the kids all the time, I wish I
Mhm.
didn't have a phone. Kids, I wish I really didn't have to have a phone
We
and
do,
like
don't
do
we?
life with
Yes.
this thing. But we
Yeah.
do. It's so much
Mhm.
about communication and so much about planning, and so anyway, it was just this
Mhm.
kind of frustrating moment as a parent of just revealing how obsessed, this younger generation is, and how many boundaries I feel like we have to have with our
Mhm.
children, and with ourselves, honestly.
From a young age,
Yes.
we're wanting to do adult things. We'll see two-year-old kids acting like a mom or dad and wanting to
Mhm.
play mom or dad in their play at 3, 4. They're wanting to imitate the grown-up activities as they're growing
Yep.
older because that's what they're learning, and it helps them feel a little bit more a part of this growing up phase, that
Yep.
they're
Yeah.
longing for. I still remember when I resisted even getting a pager. Rebecca, remember
Oh,
that?
yeah.
I was going, "No, I don't need a pager. I don't wanna be tethered." Eventually, I had to have a pager. And then I was going, "No, I don't need to have a phone." Eventually, I had a flip phone, and then, "No, I don't wanna have a
Mhm.
smartphone." And then
Mhm.
it kinda you have to have those things in the jobs, most of the jobs that you're
Mhm.
interacting with that. So our kids need to learn how to manage the phone.
Mhm.
They need to learn how
As
to
they get
manage and
older.
navigate that. Correct.
Just maybe not at 6.
Not at
Maybe not
3, not at
something that's
2.
doing too
Yeah.
many things.
And I have
Yeah.
seen a lot of kids, scrolling through phones at 2 and at 3. I know in our
Mm, yeah.
home, around 2010, 2012 is when social media started to come out in a bigger way. Smartphones really hit the markets in a bigger way. And as parents, we had to wrestle through what are we gonna do with this as our kids
Mm.
ask about this, and things become more tech focused. Back then, it was you were
Mhm.
trying to navigate music and you were trying to navigate the movies that were coming out. But from there, it has expanded into so many different areas that parents have to consider. And as my kids were 4, 6, 5, 7, 8, 10, and all those years, we had to really put the brakes on it and set the
Mhm.
values of what we had in our home. And we said at 16 is when you'll be
Mhm.
having a phone and social media. We don't know. I mean, it may be 18 when you're when you've left. There's so much research that shows that it's just not good for you. And we had a lot of conversations along the way. We're constantly being pushed and pressured into needing to have these things. And I know a lot
Mhm.
of teens that have come in my counseling practice that have said, if I don't have these things, I'm not going to have friends. I'm not going to be connected. So there's a lot
Wow,
at
so
stake
hard.
when you're thinking about a
Mm.
teenager, thinking about
Yeah.
the bigger
Relationships.
ramifications of saying, I'm not going to have this. Yet some
Right.
kids have been able to make it kind of cool to have a flip phone instead, to have that uniqueness in a different
Mm.
direction where they're saying, no, I don't
Mm.
have to be tethered by a phone, but it takes a lot of courage and self-confidence to do that. And many kids haven't cracked that code. They haven't figured out
Yep.
how to be that confident with their peers. And so as families, we need to really be mindful of what our kids are being exposed to. We can't just let
Mhm.
it be and let it ride. And the less time you put in those early years on teaching your kids how to handle boredom, how to handle their
Mm.
imagination, how to have an imagination, the
Yes.
more you avoid just entering in that space of teaching, the harder it'll be when they're older to try to teach them
Yeah.
that when they've already learned to rely on a screen. So put that time in with your young kids, put the phones aside and dive into some great places of imagination and some funny words that your kids will say along the way. And you as parents and all of us really, let's think about ways that we're using our phones and the way that we're modeling setting it aside when we're with people, when
Mhm.
we're engaging in relationship and doing the day to day. Are we too reliant on it? Are we too involved into the screens? And Focus on the Family has a fantastic resource. Plugged In is a wonderful resource at Focus on the Family. And there's actually a download that you can get for free. It's a parent's guide to today's technology. Parent's Guide to Today's Technology. And the link will be in the show notes. You can also find it on the Plugged In website.
We really do have wonderful segments coming up. Hang with us. Later, we'll hear a question from one of our listeners whose 3-year-old is repeating inappropriate words she hears outside the home.
Mhm.
But first, we have a great conversation with Plugged In's Paul Acey about how we can guide our kids through media and entertainment. Let's listen to our conversation with Paul.
Paul, good to have you back in on the
Yes.
show.
So happy to be here.
Yeah.
So happy to be here.
We're fans of Paul.
Now we are. And the Plugged In team.
Yes,
right?
thank you.
definitely.
Wonderful Plugged In team. And by the way, you guys wrote a book,
We
right?
did.
We here at Focus on the Family, the Plugged In book,
I read
Becoming
it.
a Screen Savvy Family.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest challenges right now for parents is just managing this media saturated culture. So it's going to be a really important conversation for us to have. And let's talk about age appropriate
Sure.
types of things. You know,
Sure.
what does it look like to develop age appropriate guidelines in our home around media? What does that
Man,
even look like?
It's so critical,
Yeah.
right? To really understand kind of your kid's level, to understand how they process things. Danny, you're obviously the expert on kind of how these age and stage things develop. But when you're looking at sort of processing media through an age appropriate lens, parents just have to be really super aware of where their kids are, what they can deal with, what you can talk to them about, when you can even start giving them a little bit of license to make their own decisions, because that's honestly a really important part of this process, right? I kind
Well,
of
and that's the heart of Plugged In,
right. Exactly.
right? That's what you guys are trying to do is equip.
That's exactly right. I think that sometimes people come to our site and they come because they want to know how many swear words are in a
That's
given
right.
movie, right? And
Yeah.
that's good.
It's a
I'm
bummer
glad
you,
that
you guys
people
have to count that.
we really do.
Yeah.
That's a whole process which we
Yeah.
can get into.
And
But
certain themes that you just don't want
Certain-
your
no.
child exposed to
no,
at certain
absolutely.
points. Yeah.
So they come to our site really to get some nuts and bolts
I
information.
have been, side note, Paul, a lot
See,
to your
that
site.
makes me
Yes.
feel good. If we mess
Yeah.
up, I want you to be sure to give us a call and tell us
Okay.
where.
I know who to contact.
But it's really important,
It
right?
really
All
is.
those things are very important for parents to be aware of.
Yeah.
But when I think about Plugged In's primary purpose, it's not really the swear word counting. That's super important. But we'd really love to help parents learn how to equip their kids to, when they're out of the house at 18, at 22 years old, where they can process this information wisely and godly.
And make decisions for themselves.
And make decisions for themselves. I think that is so important. And that's a long-term process.
What age do you feel like ideally as parents? And I mean, again, I know you've talked about different kids are different and, they're probably maturing into their own kind of sensitivity, for these things at different times. But in a rough ballpark way, at what point should we be starting to let our kids make some of their own decisions when it comes to media, do you think?
I really believe that when a child is sort of out of their tween years, into their teen years, that's when you can start sort of opening the gate a little bit, and sometimes it can go much younger than that. Not much younger, but I would say...
Like at 2?
Don't do it with the 2-year-olds. That's bad. That's bad. For a 2-year-old, you just say, if they say, I would like to watch Deadpool and Wolverine, you just say, no, don't do that. But when they're, 13, 14, 15, they're starting to push back on you a little bit anyway, right? They're starting to question your authority. They're starting to experience the world for themselves outside of your influence. And that's a really great time, I think, to start giving them the information and a little bit more freedom to navigate some of this stuff on your own. Now, as you know, Danny, giving a 13-year-old a set of car keys is not going to be a great thing. And you don't want to just open up the doors for it completely. But I do think that what you can do is you can start having really open-ended conversations with your kids. If they come to you and say, I really want to watch this movie, then you can say, okay, well, maybe we can go to Plugged In and look at the review, and let's talk through it together. And I know that this is something you've done with your own kids, Danny, where you say, let's just figure out whether you think that this is appropriate.
Yeah, I remember talking to Alex as he was getting older, my son, and this idea of equipping.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's a brain that he gets to care for. He's a steward of the brain he's been given. He doesn't get a new one at the end of 18.
Yeah.
I mean, you're stewarding this thing,
language.
and it's going to be something that is with you throughout your whole life. So the more things you expose it to, the more you have to sort through in your brain.
Right.
And sometimes there are automatic impulses.
Right.
And there's certain themes that you really need to watch out for. And you guys look for those landmines. One of them being sexual content. The brain gets very deeply impacted by that. Extremely graphic, violent content, impacted in the brain.
Right.
Horror type things impact in the brain because the brain actually thinks it's there. So it's having an experience with the media.
With fear.
Yeah,
right. Absolutely.
Or the experience, the sexual experience, whatever it is. And talking with my son, it was really interesting to talk through certain movies. Like we talked about Passion of the Christ compared to another rated R movie. And we're going, okay, so which one do you think would be a more redeeming one within your worldview?
Right.
And then let's look at what's included in this radar movie compared to this one. And as you're putting this in your brain, what's happening there?
What red flags should we be looking for that our kids might be developing an unhealthy dependence on entertainment or media?
That's a great question. It is both a complicated and an easy question to answer, right? Because you do have, when you find that they are developing sort of this unhealthy connection. Let's just take social media, for instance. A lot of it is the time that they're spending on it. It can be a huge issue, the amount of time that they're spending on it. At Plugged In, I think we would always advocate the less time you spend focused in on a screen, the more time you're focused with people face to face, when
100%.
you're looking people in the eye, when you're talking with them person to person. That's the ideal thing. it can be really unrealistic in the environment that we have to move completely away from social media. It's just a part of kids' lives, and it's a part of our lives too. We use it a lot, but it's really important to pay attention to the time that your kids are spending with it.
Yeah.
I know when my son was growing up, he loved music, loved music, but there were bands that he spent a lot of time listening to, and some of those bands did not have the healthiest messages all the time. And so we did wind up sort of throttling back, asking him to lay off certain bands for a while,
be more choosy.
Exactly, to experiment, to grow even your musical palette.
Were there some behaviors that were concerning you with that?
It was really sort of in the formative stages. I think that as a parent, you're always aware of sort of the influences that your kids are. Exactly. We didn't notice that his grades were dropping or anything like that, but we did notice that he was withdrawing a little bit from us as a family. He wasn't as talkative at dinner time. He wasn't as engaged with us when we were spending time together as a family. And so that was something that we did pay attention to. And media can just be so dominating in a child's life that you have to be wary of it. Doesn't mean that it's bad. Doesn't mean that you need to shut off all the TVs, turn off all the music, but do be aware of its influence on your kids, because it is influencing them.
And really, it's up to the parent to make the decision and to put these boundaries and limits, but then to also have the ongoing conversations with our kids as they're consuming. Even if you watched a movie that you go, man, I probably shouldn't watch that. You go, hey, so how are you guys processing this? What just happened? What are you guys thinking? What did we learn? What did you guys feel while that was happening? What are other maybe questions that we can be asking kids in those conversations?
Man, I love that, Danny, because I think it is so important. One of the things that we did sort of accidentally really well as a family, I think, not to brag, but and we weren't really trying to do this at all. But when our kids were growing up, when they were younger, we always watched. If we were going to watch something, we would watch it all together. It wasn't intentional, really, but we really wanted to be mindful of what our kids were being exposed to.
Consuming it together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We wanted, and a lot of it was for that relational reason. We wanted to be a part of our kids' world. We wanted to know what they liked and be able to engage with them. But that allowed us to have those conversations
100%.
when we were able to, when we watched something, there was something troubling that went across the screen. We were able to actually pause, and sometimes literally pause. Pause the movie and say, okay, let's talk about that a little bit.
That is their favorite, right, Paul? When you pause the movies.
Yeah. Oh, that's great,
like,
Dad.
oh,
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
How do you encourage parents to have the conversation probably with teens? And I remember this from my family of origin where, we were homeschooling and a bit conservative Christian family. Let's just put that.
Yeah.
And all the friends were watching this certain type of movie or a particular movie. And a couple of my brothers were like, well, they're all watching it and it's okay for them. And mom and dad were, holding the line of like, no, but it's not okay for our family. What, on a wisdom level and handling those conversations, what advice can you give for parents that want to help their kids to think this through?
Yeah. And I do believe that that's one of the reasons why you try to draw them into some of these conversations.
Earlier.
Exactly,
Yes,
because
right.
it helps them feel like they're a part of the conversation.
Yeah, there's ownership
this
in
is
it.
This is not a rule that comes from on high.
Yep.
Yes, no, you are not seeing that over my dead body.
Right.
You are actually sort of inviting them into the process. Now, that doesn't mean that parents give away the hammer. They still need to have that yes or no decision. But when they're brought into that decision-making process, I find that kids surprise you sometimes. When you really honestly allow them to grapple with some of these issues and they begin to see things a little bit from your eyes as a parent, and that can make those conversations easier. Now, again, every kid is different, and there are going to be some kids who say, oh, this is great. I can pull one over on my parents. But I think for the most part, kids, when you have that relationship, they can they will surprise you at their level of maturity if you give them just a little bit of say in those decisions. It is really interesting because I think that your experience growing up, I mean, that's a very common experience probably for a lot of people listening, right? They grew up in a conservative Christian home, and maybe they felt that kind of weight where, oh my goodness, my parents will never let me see anything. Plugged In is ruining my life. So I think that having those open-ended conversations, I think that can be really a helpful tool to help those relationships stay strong in the midst of some of these difficult conversations.
So piggybacking off of that, how much are you seeing, because this is your field of expertise, parents' own screen habits affecting their children, and what boundaries do you encourage with us? Like, because they are watching.
They are watching. It
sounds like a movie title, right?
They are watching. Maybe a horror
you
film,
can picture
actually.
the creepy little kid with the eyes.
Oh my.
But it is super important to
what we're modeling.
What we model. And actually, I think that that's probably step one.
Okay.
You know, sometimes we think about these screen habits as a kid problem, a teen problem. My kid is spending too much time on screen as we're scrolling through Facebook, as we're going through our Instagram feed, looking at Pinterest. You know, we don't realize, I don't think, how much time we spend on our own screens during the day. And man, I tell you what, when we talk about kids watching, they have a nose for hypocrisy.
Oh, yeah.
They do. And we have seen studies, we've heard just these stories about these kids who have thrown their parents' phones in the toilet, put them in the oven because they feel like their phones are taking attention away from them.
Wow.
And that's something we need to be really mindful of as parents. And when we have these conversations where we say, you know what, you need to stop using your screen so much, a great way to sort of soften the blow for that very difficult conversation is to say, and I need to stop using my screen so much too.
Good.
And we're going to do this together.
Wow, Danny, I really love Paul, and I love his heart to support and encourage families as we wrestle through what does wisdom look like when it comes to technology in this day and age. It's some really, really great takeaways from this conversation. What was stand out for you?
Well, I love the idea of consuming media together. Our family, we've made that a priority. If we're gonna do video games, let's play them together as a family, all four of us, or at least two of us together. It's relational, and we still will find time to do that. Recently, my son said, "Hey, can we play some video games together?" And he's had a real balanced approach to video games. He enjoys them, but he has learned from an early age that we do it. It's a family activity, something he sometimes does at his friend's house if he's visiting with them, and he did that growing up. And so consuming together as a family, making that a part of a variety of things you do as a family. It's not the only thing you do, but it's part of that variety, and your kids can look forward to that. We used it as a way of celebrating a hard-earned week, a week that we've had where we're tired, and if everyone's saying, "Man, kind of tired," we say, "Hey, how about we watch a movie together and just let everything land, and let's just celebrate that we had a really good week together as a family." And we put that stamp on that, and then we enjoy the movie. One thing that I think is also important that he talked about are the age-appropriate guidelines. We need to be mindful of that, and knowing that we can't just count on the PG-13 or the rated R, or even on the TV now, the TV-14. We've got to really do the homework and figure out what is it that we're about to consume. Is it age appropriate, and is it appropriate for my child's consumption, especially those preteen and younger age years? They want to be older than they really are, and we need to help them be discerning and being able to say no, that we're not here to make them happy. We're here to put some boundaries and guidelines and limits, and that is why Plugged In is a resource for parents, is to give you all the information you need so that you guide your family in a well-informed way. We're not making the decision
Yes.
for you, nor do we ever want to do that. We want to give you the information, and you get to lead the way as a parent to that child that's never been raised by anyone else except for you. You know them, their
Mm.
personality, tendencies, their weaknesses, their strengths, all of that, and so you get to guide them along the way. We just want to give you all the tools you need in order to do that the best you can.
Well, you guys are really being, with the ministry of Plugged In, guardians of the family. And I
Mm.
mean, every area of focus on the family is really that in its own way. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful work. And we're really thankful for what this team does. If you're listening and you're interested, you can find the link for Plugged In below in the show notes. And we'd also like to offer you the Plugged In team's book, Becoming a Screen Savvy Family. And you were involved in that too, Danny, weren't
I
you?
was, yeah.
Didn't you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
chapter 2
I
on the
read
brain.
quite a lot of
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Uh-huh,
it's
yeah,
fun.
so awesome and such a gift. So if you send in a gift of any amount, that will be coming your way, Becoming a Screen Savvy Family, and you can find the link for that in the show notes as well. Well, it's time for our weekly Q&A. This week's question comes from a mom named Olivia, who asked,
Hi, my name is Olivia. I'm a mom of a 3 year and 4 month old daughter, a 2 year old daughter, and an almost 1 year old son. So, my 3 year old, she started repeating some things that either her dad says or that she heard some other young kids say, but kids that don't use the nicest words. And so, how can I help guide her to using a better choice of words? Because even saying, "See, this kid spoke this way. It wasn't a nice way of speaking, and in our house we don't use those words." Um, it doesn't really do anything, and so I was wondering if you can help with that.
Well, thank you, Olivia. What a fantastic question. Kids truly
mm-hmm,
mirror what they hear, what they see. And so your just your observation that maybe she's repeating certain things she's hearing makes absolute sense. And what a great opportunity for you to dive in deeper with your 3-year-old daughter to teach her. This is going to give you some practice and patience, and so
yeah.
that's a gift you get out of this whole thing. But really, one very practical tip that has been helpful to parents of kids this age is the concept of that kind words are sweet. And what you can do is with your 3-year-old, find some sweet treats that she absolutely loves. Put them in a special jar, or if they're frozen, you can put them in the freezer and have them be the kind word sweet treats. And so whenever she uses a kind word or a life-giving word that where you just want to notice it, you can say, "Hey, I just noticed a kind word that gets a sweet treat." And this is one where it's
Mm.
just random moments where you're helping her dopamine respond to that, and it very infrequent. Just give her moments of reinforcement that where you're noticing and creating a connection between kind words and good feelings. Now, some parents have had the concern: Am I going to create an addict towards sweets? Uh, and you're not. You do this infrequently. Find other things where you can notice it. You can even just start clapping. You can celebrate. Generally, 3-year-old kids want to laugh. They want to have sweet treats. They want to have attention. They want to have affirmation. And so there are a variety of ways where you can recognize, wow, that was life giving. And you can even say it that way. That was life giving. She may not know initially what that means, but over time she will as you continue to use that language and just make a big deal. Even if you have pom-poms as well, you can cheer when she is using those life-giving words and giving that reinforcement because in general those kids she is wanting to get that affirming response from you. Teach her the power of her words. And the way that you can do that is say, hey, we're gonna practice something. We're gonna try something. Go to your dad and say these particular words. And maybe it's, I love you, or I love that you're my daddy, and see the response and help her see that words create certain very, very loving responses in return, and also help her see when she sees certain words how the other person might be feeling according to how she feels it. So if you say, "When I say I love you, how do you feel?" "Oh, very good, mommy." Okay. When you tell someone that, they feel the same way. They feel really good. And so when you say mean words, when someone says mean words to you, what does that feel like? And she may say, "Well, it makes me sad," or "makes me mad." Well, when you say those words, you're creating that in another person, and is that what you're wanting to do? Do you want them to feel that? And it may reveal something there. She may say yes because I am mad and I want them to feel sad. And 3-year-olds have been known to say that. 3 and 4 have said, "Yeah, I want them to feel bad," and so then you can help them find new ways of being able to communicate when they're sad and mad, rather than doing something to someone else.
That's so good. Man, there's some really great tips in there, Danny. Thank you so much. I'm storing them away for my family life too. And I had kind of a funny thing that happened just recently, actually, with my 4-year-old, Olivia. I'm really relating to you. He's a little boy, and he has heard in our family that you don't take God's name in vain, that's not something our family does. And so the girls, 10 and 6, they will just, spell it out. Oh, so and so, mommy said, oh my God, and I know we don't say that in our family. And so that's been a topic of a conversation. So River overheard this at 4, and he says, "Oh, mommy, we don't say oh my geode. We don't say oh my geode. That's not good." And so it was so cute. It was so adorable because he's like talking about rocks, but he just
Yeah.
doesn't even know. That's what he heard. We don't
Yeah.
say oh my geode. So I'm right there with you, Olivia, and trying to point our kids in the right direction. But Danny,
What a great
there was
story.
so much gold in what you were sharing, and so practical. So thank you so much. Thank you, Olivia, again for your question. And if you are listening and you have a question for us, please send it in. We would love to answer it. Click the link in the show notes or go to practicemakesparent.com and click the button on the side of our show page to submit a voicemail. And if your voicemail gets selected, we'll send you a signed copy of Danny's wonderful book, 7 Traits of Effective Parenting, for free as our way of saying thank you.
Well, we hope that this episode gave you some practical tips that you can use right away on how to guide your children through this media-saturated world.
And how to be savvy with it.
That's right.
I love
That's
that
right.
title of the book, Screen Savvy Parent. And this is just one of the reasons why we love doing this podcast. I really, really do. Because our goal is to equip parents like you with practical tools that you can use in your everyday life with your kids. Thank you very, very much for giving your time and listening.
I'm Dr. Danny Huerta.
And I'm Rebecca St. James. Join us next week for more tips for transforming your parenting on Practice Makes Parent.